Tim, you're a certified ball knower, so I'm going to ask you this question we've kind of been working on all week, right? So I asked somebody on like Monday or Tuesday, and we've ended up asking this question about 800 times throughout the week. If you can, in light of the Super Bowl and kind of what we saw there, if you can consistently get pressure with 4, is there anything else in football you would take over that?
I don't think so. The only other thing I can think of, just in terms of dominating a game and managing time of possession and winning, is just consistently getting 5+ yards on the ground. Like if I know I'm getting at least 5+ yards on the ground, that's the only other thing. But no, I think if you can get home with 4, I mean, it is truly a blessing. Like, and we've seen it in recent years. Like, truly, just like, hey, if you can consistently get home with 4, like the Eagles did. Like, you know, the 2 years where you know, where we're talking about, you know, the Georgia dynasty and what Kirby was building. It was because of what they had up front, and so and a lot of those same guys obviously played in the Super Bowl. But yeah, if you can get home with 4, I like, because the only other thing I can think of is like a true lockdown corner or 2 true lockdown corners. But even then, we've seen that not work. You know, we've seen that. But if you can get home with 4, yeah, it's really tough to defend that.
Tim, when you're kind of taking a look at what Nebraska's been able to do in the portal, and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you are on the same page with the impact of high school newcomers. Like, I don't really see it. I think most of these guys are kind of a year or 2 away from impact, and that's not to be dismissive. I just think it's how Nebraska wants to play in year 3. And you pit it against what other schools have done in the portal, because obviously Nebraska has the good portal ranking, and I think they're in everybody's top, 5, 6, 7 in terms of portal additions. Are we talking about like the big 4? Are we talking about Nawari? Are we talking about Pritchett? Are we talking about I'm forgetting
Keys,
Rocco, and Keys? Like, I mean, is that kind of the core? Maybe Desan McCullough. Some people add him, and I get it, but I'm not sure he would make my top 4. He's maybe 5. And I won't split hairs over that. Like, you could convince me otherwise. But however you put the 4, we're talking about just a base core group, right?
Right. I mean, I would have McCullough over Enwinari for now, just because of production to this point and what we've seen.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
But I get what you mean, because, like, again, hypothetically, if Enwinari is locked in and plays up to the player he is, we're talking about him a lot more at
I think
the season that we are.
The rankings of the portal are based on his rankings too. So I have to put that in there.
Right, for sure. And that's the thing. It's just, I think midway through the season, if Enwinari plays up to what his potential is, we're talking about him a lot more than we are talking about Dejan McCullough, even though Dejan McCullough is going to be an important piece for this defense. I just think that's the type of talent that Williams Enwinari is. But yeah, I think it's those 4. Again, I think if you're looking at, someone off that list to potentially make that jump, I think Andrew Marshall is one to keep an eye on in the DB room. I think he's a guy that can play. Jameer Khan, potentially, whoever comes out of that DB room, whether it's him or Justin Rhett. And then the other one is just like who that second receiver is. Is it Isaiah Hunter? Is it Harley Gilmore? Is it someone else already on the roster? Probably going to be Ja'Cory Barney, in my opinion. I think those are going to be your top 2 receivers with the collection of others contributing. But I agree with that top 4. Yeah, and I had the question this week in the mailbag of like, hey, which freshmen do you think make rules like 57? We talked about that 57 number. There's like 5 or 6 guys that even have a chance of actually realistically can make that. I don't think it's going to be that many freshmen in that 2-3 deep this year.
Cortez Mills, is he in that 5?
I think so. I think Cortez Mills, I think one, if not both, of Dawson Merritt and Christian Jones, and then Isaiah Mosey, one of the 2 running backs, if not both. And then you could make the argument for one of the 3, if not 2 of the 3 defensive linemen coming in. But they're all 3 are summer guys, which is tough.
This is zero disrespect to the ceiling. Merritt has a long way to go. And I say that because not only stylistically, but he's coming off putting his shoulder back together.
Right.
I mean, so we're talking about just to go through the rigor of conditioning and lifting and push pulling with upper body strength. I don't know, man. Like he's his frame. I don't know. And
Yeah.
it's not personal because I do like the upside. But I would say the same thing, and I'm around him all the time. I would say the same thing about CJ, right? Where, okay, if we're going to play inside, guards uncovered, shooting your shot, like it's going to take some time, even though I think his competitive stamina is at a super high level.
Right. That's why I think, like, for that reason, I think, and the injury, the lack of injury helps here. But I think Christian Jones has the better shot of making that top 57. But yeah, I mean, like, again, adding Marquise Watson, Trent, and where that room is now, there's no pressure on either of those guys either. And I do forget, with Merritt too, it is coming off that injury, and I'm actually very interested to see how big he looks this spring. Like, how much, if he's put on, how much weight, if any, that he's put on, and where he's kind of standing before the season, because that's another big thing for me with him is just getting that weight up.
Tim, as we kind of look at transfer class versus incoming freshman class, is there, I don't know if concern is the right word, but has there been any thoughts on your, as you kind of look through this roster, about guys that you thought maybe from last year, 2024's freshman class, that would have gotten playing time this year that maybe are going to have to wait in line a little bit longer in light of the transfers?
I think the DB room is one where you're looking at where, it's again, it's just crowded, and it's like, okay, hey, I mean, the ideally these guys should be playing, but not anymore. And then again, the offensive line as well. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I think you'd like to be building depth the way they are right now, but kind of thought we would see, and still might, but kind of thought, Preston Tuamu, Gibson Pyle, those kind of guys would be competing for a starting interior spot. I think those opportunities would be limited for those guys, which is not a bad thing. And I think, Donovan Raiola has those guys locked in to the point that, they're okay sitting for another year or rotating in for another year. But I think those two positions in particular are the ones that come to mind for me.
TV, I was saying, yes, just kind of thinking out loud this week, trying to press panic. I'm really not. Just food for thought on kind of how this works, because the NFL had to go through this period where they took some shots, and I think people that were watching the sport weren't in love with the physicality and tackling for a period of time in the NFL. And the players and coaches said, we've got to go through this transition period with the collective bargaining agreement, how frequently we can put on full pads, how mandatory camps work. We have to learn to manage this new era. I say all that to say, with colleges getting down to 105 and playing 13, some will play 14, 15, 16 games. How much data do you think we'll need to collect, or how much time do you think it will take to collect on whether that's a decent number for the style of play and the longevity of how long a season can take with 105 guys? Because my impression is that number will go somewhere to like 120, especially with like the new Title IX, kind of what's come out of Washington and things like that, where I don't know if 105 is enough if you want to be one of the 12 teams playing 15, 16, 17 games.
Right. I think 120, like, and that's just in general. I think that they should have done like something of like not a grandfather in, but like, kind of like a wind down period where you do cut it initially to 120 and then get down to 105. Like, I think we're going to do it essentially in reverse, where if you're talking about a timeline, I mean, probably similar to the portal, that they give it 3-4 years, or like, like the college football playoff as well, where they give it a couple of years to kind of evaluate and see. I think that's what we're in for. I think we're going to get at least 2 years of this 105 limit, and then
I just don't want to see the rash of injuries and have coaches say, hey, the wear and tear, or because I think there's this, and I don't know what the answer is. I do think coaches that can figure out how to ramp up rigor without tearing down bodies is going to be pretty important. Somewhere along the line, the whole working smarter versus harder thing, because I mean,
Yeah.
16 receivers running routes with comp squad versus getting ready. Those numbers go in a hurry, man. You go 3-4 wide receiver set like it. Do the math in your head. It's hard.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you look at the group they have right now and what's kind of coming down the pipeline too. Like, yeah, I and that's what's weird too. You look across team to team too. There's so many different strategies right now and how to best prepare these teams long term. I mean, every team has a somewhat different strategy for sleep and how they address that depending on the travel week. It's different in the ACC compared to the Big Ten, compared to the SEC, where there's a little different travel. There's different team to team as well. And for some rosters, like there's some that are like, hey, 105 is like a luxury for us. Like we're building up to, we have 105 spots. But for a team like Nebraska, it's like, oh, this really hurts our depth. This really like cuts into our depth. And so that's how a lot of Power 4 teams are. So there's both sides of it where I think it's just going to be, there's going to be a lot of tweaking. There's going to be a lot of different strategies that come out. Ultimately, we talk about process over results. Some of the right process may end up leading to bad results and vice versa. So I'm curious to see how each team approaches this limit moving forward, especially these rosters where, okay, like with Nebraska right now, you're fine with the wide receiver numbers where they're at because your top end, hypothetically, at least on paper, is very, very good. But those teams that aren't, those teams where, hey, our receivers are a collective, man, you need to be deep. Like you have to be deep when you've got a collective of receivers and you don't have a clear top three that is really good. Same thing at running back. So some of those teams at the lower end that are dealing with those depth things.
Backs is another good one.
Yeah.
Are you going to give good looks?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, like you can't, like hypothetically you want to build multiple body types in your running back room so you can give your defense different types of looks depending on the opponent. You can't do that anymore.
Tim, I sometimes wonder if we make too much of the numbers because I compare it to the NFL, right? We go 53, like comparing it to what Nebraska's been at, it's a dramatic decrease. But the NFL, they go 16 games, 17 games now. They've gone 16 games forever. It's a 53-man roster, 17-man practice squad. That's 70 guys. Is it the fact that they can complete transactions, and so the number of different guys that are actually on a practice squad or a roster over the course of the season is way higher than that 70? Or are we just not used to the constraints, so it feels like it's strangling us?
I think it's just the not used to it. Like that's the thing. Like I said, I think there's going to be more of that as we get into spring and through the summer and into the season where some teams see the 105 as a luxury and some teams see it as a constraint, and it's just solely dependent on how you built your roster leading up to the season. And so I think hypothetically the 105 is probably fine for most teams. Like again, there's going to be some depth issues at certain programs. You're going to see that, especially with how just long the seasons are. I mean, like look at Notre Dame this year, like what they had to deal with along their offensive line. Most teams aren't built for that type of loss and are capable of picking up, where you can have a guy like Rocco Spindler step up and be your starter for the next 12, 13 games. You could have your starting left tackle go down and then come back at the very end of the season and play through a pectoral tear. Like it's just not normal. And so, there's going to be some teams that, hey, 4 games into the season, oh man, we're just not going to, we don't have it this year. We just don't have the depth. There's no way we can make a run like we thought we could just because we don't have the depth. But then there's going to be other teams that have the 105 and are like, oh wow, we have like a lot more and we can go deeper at certain positions than we ever have before because we have 105 scholarship spots.
You know what's funny is and maybe it has something to do with how far they got. I get that. Mm-hmm. But for how much we value the position, it's amazing how dismissive we are that Nebraska was able to go 8 and 9 deep in their offensive line and function at a relatively
we didn't really notice.
We didn't really notice. We didn't talk about them playing their 8th or 9th offensive lineman, and it's such a coveted position group. And I still, TV, don't think Donnie got enough credit for seamlessly doing that. Because when those younger guys were playing, we weren't talking about issues with the offensive line.
Yeah, like nobody thought Gunnar Gattulo was going to play coming into the year.
It's like, oh, that was nice, and I said no disrespect, but Nebraska was winning games in the Big Ten with Gunnar Gattulo.
Mm-hmm.
Right, he's a year ahead of schedule.
Yeah,
minimum.
At least a year. Yeah, at least a year. Like, there's a chance he doesn't start this year. Like, there's a real like.
And we're very, very dismissive of that.
Yeah. For sure. Like the conversation on Donovan Raiola is interesting because on one hand, like for me, like I framed it this way earlier this week. I think this is the offseason. The line has to make a bit of a jump from this like solid to good, at least good, and be a good unit here in 2025. But then on the recruiting side of things, yeah, there've been some misses recently. I think there's some pressure mounting there, but at the same time, I don't think you can dismiss, how quiet, I guess, the room is competent. Like, that's the thing. Like, that's the best way to put it, is the room turned from, at times incompetent under the previous staff to, hey, they're competent. They can run a couple of positions deep. If you had lost some guys along the interior of the line, you probably would have felt comfortable with the Gibson Pile stepping into playing time. You probably would have felt comfortable with the Sam Sledge stepping into playing time. And this year, you feel even more comfortable. Yusuke Torres, Preston Tuamu, like, you have guys and you have depth. Grant Briggs along the interior too. Like, you have depth along the interior. Your tackle spots are for sure worrisome, just in the sense that you don't have the depth that you would ideally like, but you have bodies and you have capable bodies where, hey, this could be a good unit. It's just the pressure's kind of on Donnie to kind of get this group to take that next step. But overall, yeah, like you're saying, I don't think at the same time he's gotten enough credit for making that room competent.
We're talking to Tim Verghese from Inside Nebraska. Tim, we had the combine invites go out yesterday, I believe. Any surprises there for you in who got invited and maybe who didn't?
Yeah, no. There's obviously the fact that no Nash is pretty surprising for me. I'm not surprised Isaiah Neyor made it. I just feel like this is going to be one of those things where NFL teams are just going to fall in love with the combination of size and speed. That's how it works. That's the NFL. It's a size, height, weight, speed league, yeah, and he had a good day at the Shrine Bowl. Like, he kind of showed strong, like, people talk about his hands and all of that. He showed stronger hands at the Shrine Bowl than he did at Nebraska, as weird as it sounds. So like, we'll see how he tests the combine, but that's a guy that I think is going to get drafted. Tommy Hill, not surprised that he made it. I still think, I know there was like, I think the general consensus from people in this fan base is that he had a bad week. Talking to people, there was for sure some bad reps and some really bad reps that got magnified, but there were some really good reps in that week too. And there are teams that left that week feeling like he's a guy that they can still draft in the 4th or 5th or even 6th round. At this point, I think he needs to cut some weight. I think he came in a little too heavy. I think he needs to be 100% healthy, because I think some of the lost reps is just clearly just being unable to fully plant and turn. So if he's 100% healthy, I think the combine should go better for him. But yeah, like, I think national making it's tough. Like, it really sucks. But at the flip side, what's overall, I think, going to be a good thing for Nebraska, I think you're going to see more interest in Nebraska's pro day than we have in a couple of years.
Yeah. So, TV, like, I'm not outwardly petty, but quietly I am very much a receipt keeper. So the DMs that I have like blown up, you're laughing because you already know where I'm going with this. Number one, it was all the guys that told me that the only reason I said Raiola was a good offensive line coach is because I wanted to get Dylan. And people were up in arms that coach kept Donnie to begin with. And I said, I gave the analogy of, open your checkbook and see what your money's spent on. Like, that's where your interests are. And then I said, compare that to talking about how many times you actually talked about the offensive line as being an issue when Nebraska lost. It was next to none. So I understood why Coach Rule wanted to retain Donnie. The other is, and it was about a succession of 3 weeks with Neyor, because when I came back from the first couple of practices, I said, gosh, I think Nayer's a Sunday talent. Like, that dude is a Sunday talent. Long arms, he's fast. man, TV, he went through a stretch in the middle of this season where you'd have thought I said a guy's mom was like destitute or something. It was vitriol. And I'm like, okay. So when I saw the combine list come out, the first person I texted was Ravi. And I was like, I'm going in tomorrow. I'm taking my victory lap on there. No, I'm just playing. No, I did say that, but I'm not going to. But I think you're right. And I love how you said it.
He's going to test really well.
It's just how the NFL goes. Now, the other thing about Tommy Hill that I'll say is the one thing that he's going to have to do has nothing to do with physical. He just has to show guys that he's willing to hang in there and he loves playing. If he can do that, he'll figure out a way to play because he can play a little bit of inside. And he could be a nickel guy. I don't know how much he can play outside the numbers unless he does what you said in terms of changing, his
body type,
a little bit. But he's got range in there with his weight. He's one of those guys that I think gave the staff pushback about playing. I never called him by name, but he's the one guy. I said, we had a guy play at 172 2 years ago in Power 5 football in the secondary. It's Tommy Hill. And so the next year when he comes back and he's maintaining weight at 202, I was like, how is this dude a 202-pounder? So I think he has some range there that he can play with. I don't worry about that. I just worry, or I hope, that he's committed to playing because if he is, he's got plenty of talent.
Yeah, I agree. And he's a guy for me, that's what the league's kind of looking for in corners these days, and DBs specifically. And so, you like the length, you like all of that. And with Neyor, I'll say this too, because I've noticed it in this fan base and other fan bases too. Like this happens time and time again where the draft comes around and they're like, wait, that guy's getting drafted? Like he didn't even do all that, And it's like, one, you should be celebrating the fact. Yeah, like you should celebrate the fact that your university is producing draftable talent. And two, understand that the league and the way they evaluate talent is not solely just off production. It's off of traits. And again, everyone's fast in the NFL. Everyone's big in the NFL. If you can find the big fast guys, you go get those big fast guys. And you look at this draft, there's not a whole lot of big fast receivers. So Isaiah Neyor is going to get drafted, and I think it's going to surprise some people. And they're going to be like, wait, what the heck? But at the end of the day, if you want to reduce it down to this, it's another draft pick for Nebraska. If you don't want to be mad about it, you can just consider it. Hey, it's another statistic. It's another recruiting graphic that goes out.
That's our guy Tim Verghese inside Nebraska. Tim, appreciate it as always. Good
Thanks,
stuff.
TV.
Appreciate y'all.